Hello and welcome to Crafting a Revolution, the podcast. My name is Katie Freeman and I'm your host. Every Wednesday and Friday, I bring you interviews of female and non-binary makers of all kinds from all over the world. Today's guest is Karla of Black Poppy Woodworks, located in California. Karla really... She introduces herself as an amateur woodworker and artist, but really I'd say she is absolutely 100% a woodworker and artist, and really growing into how she brings art to woodworking. So great conversation with Karla. We get a little bit into the power carving at the end, because, I can't resist when it comes up, the opportunity to talk about power carving. But great interview with Karla, and I know you're going to love it. So before we hop on in with Karla, though, I want to give a big shout out and thanks to the patrons, to the Revolution Pod Squad over on Patreon. So thank you so much. Annette of 513 Woodworks, Katie Thompson, Women of Woodworking, Kevin, Lefty's Woodshop, Christy, Twisted Twine, Jeremy Spees, Sammy Go Sammy Lee, Sven Dorsize Workshop, Rachel Moody Makes, Bonnie Toolmom Bonnie Toolmom Bonnie Toolmomstore.com, Laura Oakley Soap Company, Mary Lou Made by Mary Lou, Brandy Studio Obey, Lee the Rainbow Carver, Ellen Little Bear Furniture, and Ethan Carter Designs. Thank you all so very much for your continued and ongoing support, helping me to produce 2 episodes a week, every week. And let's get into the interview with Karla. Since you've listened, I do like to start by having my guests introduce themselves. So if you're up for it, we can go ahead and get started with that.
Yes. So I am Karla Vazquez Strayhorn. I consider myself an amateur artist woodworker, and I own a small business called Black Poppy Woodworks. I have 4 children. My son just turned 3. My youngest daughter is about to turn 5. And then I have 2 older daughters, 16 and 21. I met my husband while we were both in the military, and we're both out now, but we have been married for 9 years.
Okay. Awesome. Did you serve in the military, like in California area?
I did not. I joined in Los Angeles. I went to UCLA, and that's where I joined ROTC. So when I first commissioned after graduating college, I worked in LA just until my first duty station, and that was about 6 months, and then left California until kind of recently.
Okay.
Went all around serving everywhere else. I got out while I was in Washington, and then my husband was still in. He got stationed up in Northern California, and then that's where I moved. That we moved there and lived there until we came here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are you glad to be back then in Southern California?
Yes, I couldn't wait. I was happy to be in Northern California because it was California. I am partially California, just having grown up here. So I was closer to my family than when I was in Washington and everywhere else in like the world. So once both my husband and I did corporate America for a while, and then we were like, yeah, when I had my daughter is when I decided to become a stay-at-home mom. But before that, I did corporate America. I did blue collar work. I did firefighting. I was an EMT for a while, and that was the path I was gonna stick with until I got pregnant with my daughter. My 2 older daughters are through marriage. So when I got pregnant with my daughter, obviously everything changed. And I tried to go back to work, and that didn't work out with my schedule and my husband's schedule. So decided to stay home, which was great, but we were all by ourselves up there with no support system. So it was a bit rough. So when my husband decided to change his career path also, I said, okay, well, let's start over. Let's go. My family's down here, so let's go home. And It's been great. So now I have my mother and father live, I don't know, 5 minutes away. My brother is maybe 10 minutes, cousins, friends, all that stuff. So it's really nice, like
Mm-hmm.
to have that support system and that help. So
Yeah,
we're happy.
I I definitely understand that. I mean, like that was what was hard when we started a family living in Oceanside because we didn't have any family there. So it's definitely, yeah, definitely different when you're trying to like raise a family without any kind of exterior support system
Yes.
in place.
And it just makes it harder. Like now here we're like, oh, we can go to the movies and watch like an adult movie. How awesome.
Yeah,
My kids were
exactly.
so young there. Going to the movies was non-existent anyway, but when we did, it was like, let's go watch, I don't know, Blue's Clue and see if the kids can sit through the entire thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But now it's like, oh yeah, we can go watch whatever we want. It's great.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I want to, I guess, just get to know a little bit more about your story of like growing up and what kind of things you were interested in as a kid.
So everything hands-on. That's probably the case for a lot of makers. From a little kid, it was all about blocks. I actually wasn't a very social kid. They thought that maybe something was wrong with me, and then my mom figured out, no, it's actually she's just very bored. She likes to do.
Mm-hmm.
So like kind of traditional kindergarten didn't work for me, and my mom actually moved me out of regular kindergarten into Montessori. And so that was more my style, more everything's kind of hands-on, independent, working. So that's just kind of, I think, how my hands-on wanting to do everything with my hands started. And then my dad, as a teenager, if something had to be fixed in the house, I was right there with him fixing it in the house. And when I got my own car, it was like, you're getting underneath there and you're changing the oil. Oh, you need brakes? Okay, here's the tools. Here's how you change your brakes. Like, here's how you change a tire. So it was just very, that kind of gets you going. And when I was about, I think 17, I built like a little swing, and I was like, he's like, here's a tool, here's a jigsaw, I'm like, oh, cool. How do you use it again? Okay, yeah, let's do this. Like, so it was really fun being able to kind of do those things like that. And then my senior year in high school, I started drawing. And that was what I did through college. I didn't go to college for art at first. I went for biology and then changed it. while I was in college, I realized, I was like, I don't know if I really like this. I want to do art. So I submitted a portfolio to the arts and architecture school there at UCLA, got accepted, changed my major. I know it's never the popular choice versus like biology major to art major, but I was like, this is what I want to do. It's fun. I love it. I want to actually enjoy college. So I did that. And like I said, I was in ROTC when I was there. So did not further that once I joined the military, because now I'm focused on my military job, which was, it's a really long title. It's CBRNE, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear engineering, or explosives. So that was my job for 8 years in the military. While I was in the military, though, I did get chances to do lots of things here and there. Like I helped build our live fire range, cutting out targets, painting them, making them look like people. We made like these fake little like blood capsules. So when you, this is the kind of stuff we do, but when you shoot it, it's more realistic or whatever. So it was fun. So I got to I did a lot of that, building of targets, various boxes and things like that when I had the chance in the military. And then when I got out, one of the things you're trained in the military is, as an officer, is kind of like your natural path is to go corporate America, because you're in charge of people and all that. So I did that. I worked for Target, for corporate Target. It was good, but again, not my cup of tea. Stuck around there until my husband got stationed in that was in Washington. When he got stationed in California, then we moved. And then I was like, okay, since we're moving, I'm going to try something different. I went and worked at a chemical refinery for Dow Chemical. Completely hands-on. I loved it. I got to use tools every single day. It was great. But still wasn't feeling fully. I was like, we didn't have our own children yet. The other children were older. I was like, I want kids. I'm not sure if this is the healthiest place to work. 16-hour shifts around, unfortunately, like kind of cancerous chemicals all day, every day. So that's when I switched over to the firefighting EMT, but then got pregnant. And like before my daughter was like 1, then when I got pregnant with my son, so I kind of spent a while pregnant, raising the babies. And so when I decided to stay at home is when the woodworking started. I said, here I am, the kids or my daughter at first is asleep. What do I do?
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, let's clean, let's fold onesies. Like I got this. And then I'm still like, no, there's gotta be something else. And so I started making stuff for my baby. And baby toys. I made like a wooden rattle, tiny little wooden cutout toys, teethers, things like that for her. And then everybody's like, oh, these are so cool. I want one for my kid. I'm like, yeah, sure. Started making more, and then making little shelving, like decor for her room. And then it just morphed to like friends and family saying, I want that too. And then, hey, you should try selling that stuff. And I'm like, well, that's a good idea. And it started like that. I'm like, oh, let me try this Instagram thing. I didn't even really do Instagram. So throw some things on there. And it was working. I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like people actually want to buy my stuff, and I'm staying at home with my daughter. I'm doing what I love. And then next, it was like craft shows, and that's how it really started picking up for me, was going to craft shows and doing custom work, custom orders. And so now that's pretty much like where I'm at with doing more custom orders, and then making whatever I want to make, which is my favorite part. Just make stuff just to make it, which is where the craft shows come into play, because I make whatever I want to make, whether I keep it, gift it, sell it, or I just take it to a craft show. It's great. I'm like, hey, here's, I was working on different things last month, and this is all the stuff I was working on. Take it to a craft show, and it always goes over well. It's fun. I get to talk to people, which is my favorite part. And people just get to kind of see, what I'm capable of doing. And I love it because people can appreciate the artist in me at a craft show, because you get to see all the different things that I make. And they're like, you made all this? Like all of it? And I'm like, yes, me. Like, you have tools? Like, yes, I have tools. I made these things by hand. So yeah, that's how Black Poppy Woodworks started. I was like, oh, well, I'm going to actually start doing this for real.
Yeah.
Let me, make a little business out of it. That's where I'm at now.
Hey makers. So today's podcast episode is sponsored in part by Alicia Van Osdal, who is the owner of Basil Blue Design Company. Alicia is a maker of all things, really. Her focus is on beautiful craftsmanship through woodworking, repurposing, refinishing, art, and sculpture. Her background includes 30 years of graphic design, logos, and branding. If you have an idea or concept and need a creative solution or graphic design, you can email Alicia directly at Alicia, and that is ALICIA at basilblue.com. Or you can visit her website at www.basilblue.com. And fun fact, Alicia actually designed the logo for Crafting Revolution. So that is an example of the impeccable work you can expect if that is something you are in the market for. So be sure to look up Alicia again at her website, basilblue.com. All right, let's get back into the action. Yeah, and I've followed along with you for a little while, and I definitely love, like, I wouldn't call you an amateur artist and a woodworker, because I think like you definitely, always bring some element of, I would say like more of an artistic element to all of your pieces, like versus, just straight up like, here's a cutting board or here's a whatever just out of wood. I feel like you always add a little bit of flair to whatever you work on.
Yes, that is definitely what I try to do, make it different. I don't want it to look like it came from the store. So I guess I consider myself an amateur because it's like everything, there's so many mess ups, but it's normal. But every time I'm like, okay, how, it's like something new for me almost every time. Even when, if I'm doing a cutting board, I'm like, I torture myself. I'm like, oh yeah, that way worked last time, but why stick with that? Let's try something completely new and different. Like, because why not? Right. So that it's like, and then it's like hours in the shop, just completely like screwing stuff up. I'm like, oh, that didn't work. But, so I think maybe just on some of the technical parts for me, I feel that way because I'm like always like messing up in there. But I think
that's how, I think that's how any, either like any maker or artist like grows.
Yes.
Because even if you completely change it the next time, there's still some skills that like transfer over and that you continue to build on. Like it might not be like doing it the exact same way. However, like you learn something from that to take into the next job. So, I'm the same way. I think that's why I have a hard time. Like I have a hard time doing craft show type stuff, like batching out like, 20 of something. Like I've done it before, and like I would do like coasters and wine bottle holders and stuff like that, because it's pretty portable, it's not super heavy, and it's stuff that people will pick up like in those kind of scenarios. But by the time I've hit my like 8th coaster, I'm like, why am I doing this? Why? Like there's nothing fun about this at this point.
Yes. I definitely, that is one thing that I think is cool about it is I don't necessarily make like a ton of it. So the last craft show I did, I only had 2 sets of 4. I had 8 coasters because I just felt like making 2 sets and that's it.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, that's enough. There's 2 cutting boards. Let's see, I'll do, 5 live edge. And then I'm like, okay, cool. And then like 1 end grain. Like that's it. That's all that's there. So it's kind of like a little bit of everything. And then, on the other side, I'll do some like kids' toys or whatever, some puzzles, things like that. But that's what keeps me kind of like out of that. I'm going to make 30 of something because that sounds terrible.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, but I think that's what people like when they do come to my craft shows, it's like a little bit of everything. And there's only, I'm just honest, I'm like, yeah, I only made 2 of those and I'm not going to make any more because, well, that was a pain in the butt. So, so it's kind of nice.
Yeah. I think I tend to like sometimes, when you have to do that whole like quick elevator speech or just like give descriptive words of what you are or who you are, and it's like, I'll say like I'm a woodworker and power carver, but a lot of times like I really feel like, no, I think probably the title of artist would fit better. And I just happen to work with the medium of wood because every single piece is unique. And I actually never want to make the same piece again. So I feel like that's a bit more, unfortunately, I wish some furniture and stuff like that was easier to reproduce, like an artist can create like a painting once and not have to like do it again. And there's ways for them to have that reproduced and sold as prints and, that kind of thing. Furniture is not quite the same way.
No, not at all. I mean, I wish it would be nice to like make a killer table and then just like, reproduce that.
Exactly.
That would be great. But that's also what makes that killer table just so special and so unique. Sometimes hard to let go. I know I've done that. And I'm like, damn, I wish I still had that table. But no, I sold it. Like, dang it.
Mhm.
So
How is it? I mean, so you've been doing this as your own business for a little while because you said your youngest is 3 now.
yes,
So, I mean, compared to, kind of military life, corporate world, that space, which I feel like they're kind of pretty similar to each other.
yes.
How's it feel to be your own boss and run your own systems and all of that stuff?
It is the best. Absolutely the best. Going from, even when I was in college, I was ROTC, so that was a very structured,
Mhm.
down to the T schedule. I also did college sports, so it's like, again, kind of, you're somebody else is in charge of you and
Yeah.
everything you do. So as much as I loved like the camaraderie of the military, which was the best part, and like kind of constantly learning about everything, the part that you don't have control of yourself, you're anything. I mean, you literally
Mhm.
like 100% belong to the government. So that's why that apparently, not apparently, it does transfer over to corporate America, where you're still, you're following somebody else's
Yeah.
down to the T how they do everything. So being able to now say, oh, to feel like my own self actually comes out in my woodworking, and just being like free. I don't want to sound
Mhm.
cheesy, but it's a sense of freedom. I'm like, I belong to myself now. I don't
Right.
have to be a certain way because of my job. Being in the military and in the last jobs that I did, you're it's not fully you, because that's not necessarily like allowed.
Right.
um so yeah, now being an entrepreneur, I'm like, this is amazing. My husband's going the same route with franchise route, but still, entrepreneuring.
Mhm.
And we're like, oh, we can do whatever we want. Like, there is no like, oh, we can't do something with our kids, because it's like, well, no, we just reschedule
Mhm.
our jobs, and now we to fit around our children and raising our children and everything that they have going on. So it's so nice. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
I missed out on like so much being in the military, and even corporate America, mostly being in the military, where you can't even take a vacation when you want to take a vacation. So
Right.
you miss out on like everything family wise. But now it's like, I don't have to do that. I'm like, oh, we have a wedding to go to. Yeah, cool. Let's go, rearrange our other things and let's go to this wedding, which is different than how I basically grew up. Cause I started doing military stuff as a cadet at, I was 19 years old.
Mhm.
So by the time I was 23, I'm already gone and serving the military. So, and always away from family. So it's been very different, now that being an entrepreneur, being able to enjoy all the other aspects of our actual lives.
Mhm.
Nice.
Now I'm going to ask about, like, I guess, like the flip side of that. Is any of that scary?
Yes. So of course, when it was, I've been fortunate that I made a lot of good financial decisions early in my life. Pretty much from as soon as I joined the military, doing the right things with my money. So when it was like, oh, I am not going to go back to work, that was, you're like, wait, what? What do I do? How am I going to live? How am I going to survive? And so I just kind of focused on some investments and things like that. I do own property that I supplement my income with, rental property. So that was helpful. But besides saying, okay, how am I going to manage this financially? It was also like, well, with nobody kind of guiding me and giving me like, this is what you're going to do. We have like these rules you follow. And now you're
Mhm.
like, I don't have that. How do I do this? So it was very scary. Once I kind of figured out and it still is, to be honest, I figured out like, I guess the financial part of being an entrepreneur. But now it's still kind of like, well, where do I go from here? How do you always want to try to grow. Whereas when you're in the military or corporate America, that growth pattern is like kind of set for you. You do these things, you get promoted, you get paid more. As an entrepreneur, you have to make that for yourself. So you're like, okay, what's next? Like, how do I grow in this? I have yet to really figure that out, but I mean, it's a constant daily kind of battle with like, well, what's next? What should I do? And it's always, I guess, kind of scary because you're like, is this going to work?
Right.
So
have there been any moments of like where you feel like, okay, I went the wrong excuse me, I went the wrong direction there?
I still feel, and my husband, he's like, I think you would have met a great doctor. And I'm like, I think I would have too, but it wasn't like what I really felt. I love like science. I mean, I teach it to my kids. Like my daughter, she's not even 5 yet, and she knows a lot about anatomy of the body because I love it. She has an interest in it. So I'm still like, when I was going the path of like EMT to nursing, stuff like that, I do miss that. And I do feel like that also kind of incorporates my artistic side, learning the body. So sometimes I'm like, I could have done that, and I think about that. But then I come back to my kids and I'm like, yeah, but then I wouldn't have been able to be home and see and enjoy like every breathing moment of them. So I'm like, yeah, I could have did this and I might have been a doctor or even a nurse or whatever. But again, I'm back at shift work and always gone. And that's kind of what I was trying to get away from after the military. So it was like, man, do I want to have these really long days where I don't get to be with my kids? And I just think it would have been different because I love the fact that I am always like with them and I don't have to miss anything. It's huge. And I didn't get that from, my mother was a single mother growing up. I was a latchkey kid. Like she's at work working 2 jobs. Like me and my brother are raising ourselves. And I'm like, like that worked. No, nothing wrong with it. It worked. I turned out great, but I'm like, it would be nice to not have to do that, So
yeah, I get that. What do you feel like's been like the biggest success moment, like with Black Poppy?
I would say I've done some orders from like actual retail stores. And that has been, I just thought that was so cool. I'm like, wait, what? Like you want to sell my stuff in your store? And they've been small, like boutique stores, which are my absolute favorite. Like my favorite place to shop is small. I mean, I appreciate that. And so I was like, wow, like I went and set up some things in a store and put my little thing and my little logo. And I'm just like, this is really cool. So I would say like those orders from like small boutiques has been like my favorite. And I'm always in like awe of it. And if I also feel like when people ask me for like really important orders, again, I'm like, wow, really? Like me? So I don't know. I think it's like tapping into that when people want truly handmade, small, like I said, the small businesses wanting my stuff, I feel like that's the most successful thing to me, because that's really like my goal is to keep it really small and like very unique, but like also reach more people with it.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
that's great.
What are I mean, obviously you work with wood. You also work with resin though, right? Like you do
Yes.
both. Do you have a favorite between the two?
Ooh. Mm. That's tough. That's tough because the resin part is like painting, colors, and that really I get to tap into. I used to do a lot of painting. I haven't picked it up again because it was oil painting was what I really knew, and that the smell and the mess and like the kids and stuff. I'm like, no, I don't need them getting into any of that. But it puts me kind of in that element again, where I'm like, and I can mess up, and as long as the resin's still wet, I can like literally mess up, wipe it off, start over, or like cut it off and redo the mold or like whatever. Whereas wood, once it's done, it's done. So it's like, oh yikes, I screwed that up. Well, now hopefully I'll try to turn that into something else, but it's kind of hard to come back from. So I would say I think there's a little bit more sense of freedom with the resin work, and you really don't know how it's going to come out at all, than the woodworking. So the woodworking is still freedom too, but again, if you completely screw it up, like
Yep.
you're onto something else. So I like to do both, and that's kind of why I incorporate them into each other. But I think maybe the resin is also less messy.
You think?
So I mean, I can do it like indoors. I build a little on the table, build a little like dam for leakage. And it's something I can do inside, and I can actually do it with the kids, like running around doing, I could do a pour and like let that set and then go do something else. Whereas when I'm woodworking, I have to be, isolated in my garage. And obviously not the kids around because it's dusty, messy, and dangerous. So I guess it depends on like what I'm doing. Like, oh, for the day I'm gonna do resin and I'm gonna be inside with the kids, and then on a different day, I'm in the garage, like usually at night, making a mess.
Hey, Pod Squad. So I have an exciting announcement for you this week. At the end of this month, since we're in September now, at the end of this month, there is going to be an online festival. The Empowered Makers Online Festival is a totally free DIY party designed to inspire, empower, and educate so that you can stop that Pinterest scroll and be the powerhouse DIYing woman that you're totally capable of being. During this 4-day online event, you'll hear exclusive presentations from 12 incredible women DIYers and craftswomen covering topics like beginner electrical work, how to flip furniture, making time for DIY, and so much more. If you're ready to stop just dreaming about DIY and start taking some big freaking action, join us from September 27th through 30th for the Empowered Makers Online Festival. We can't wait to see what you create after this event. I can tell you I'm going to be one of the presenters talking about how getting to learn how to use power tools can help you feel empowered. So looking forward to hopefully seeing a lot of you over there on the online festival from September 27th through 30th. To get registered, you can go to empoweredmakers.com/revolution. So again, that is empoweredmakers.com/revolution. All right, let's head back into the episode.
So I think, well, for me, because I don't have like proper dust collection or anything like that in my garage, it's a disaster anytime I do anything. Whereas like the resin is more controlled.
Yeah, I see that. I mean, yeah, I power carve, so everything is covered in dust.
Everything.
I still have to definitely up my dust collection game for sure.
Yeah.
But I guess I feel, at least personally, it's like I have had several, $100 puddles of resin end up on the floor.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm like, really? Not as messy? Because
I haven't had like, I've had, I did it wasn't really like a river table, but I had this huge walnut slab and I filled the cracks with resin. And I did have some leakage, and I had a tablecloth. I had it on a big table and I had a tablecloth, and I just grabbed silicone and I'm like, I can't lift it. It was huge. And I'm like, and I just I rolled up the tablecloth. I made this like mold and I just siliconed like, and I clamped it down. I put a bunch of weights on it, and I actually like contained it to where it was maybe like a cup lost, because I'd note and I'm like, oh crap, it's leaking. So from that one time, I'm like, what the heck did I do wrong? Like, what do I need? And then I'm like, okay, the taping off and the silicone, the mold is like so important.
Yep.
So thankful to like YouTube. I got on there and I'm like, oh, okay. That's what I need to do better. And it worked. So I didn't have a lot of like leaks and stuff after that. So that was helpful.
Yeah. I got into the resin game like before it was popular and there were like YouTube videos on it, because I remember like scouring YouTube to try to figure it out before like I started, because resin's expensive. So
yes, it is.
I was like, I want to know what I'm doing before, like I go and do it.
Right.
But there just wasn't. And so I've like learned so much just from trial and error. And I've learned now it's like, even if I don't think the crack on the bottom connects to any other crack, I'm taping it. Like I'm not, because I'm like, resin will find a way there. It will absolutely find a way there. But yeah,
it's true.
I mean, I enjoy resin because that's where I too get to play the most with color, even though like I dye my wood pieces, you still get to play with like a whole bunch of colors at once with resin, and have so much more fun with color in that regard.
Well, I've seen your resin bowl snake, and I'm like, that looks so cool. But then I'm like, that's got to be so hard to clean up.
It is. Like before the next time before I spin another one, it's like I need to build a better enclosure so it doesn't go flying like everywhere. Yeah.
That looks fun though.
It's super fun. It totally always takes me back to like being a kid and doing the like spin art, little tiny tables with the little like paint spin art. It's totally like that. And I plan to do some more experimentation without resin. Like I want to experiment with just alcohol ink directly onto the wood without doing any resin base on it, just to see like what I can accomplish with that.
Yes, that's cool.
Yeah,
it would be fun. I've dyed a couple pieces with food coloring and alcohol. It was cool. It's interesting.
Yep. Yeah, that's always fun. And I had a gourd artist on the podcast, and I haven't found it yet, but she talked about, what are they called? They're called like ink dyes that are made specifically for gourds. And I haven't really been able, I started searching, but I haven't found any. And that seems like a fun medium, because she said there's no alcohol in it. So it doesn't, the problem with like alcohol inks, is it's like the alcohol dissipates so quickly,
so fast
that you can't, you don't really get to move around that color. It's like, it is wherever it lands. Like that's where it is. But she said that these ink dyes, like, they're movable and they don't just dissipate. So I think that could be fun to play around with those and wood spinning.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. I'll have to listen to that one. I haven't got to that one yet.
Yeah.
I think I saw her cover photo though. So yeah.
Yeah. She does some really, I mean, I found her through actually a wood carving post. Somebody had shared one of her gourds because she does these gourd lights where she carves carves the gourds and then puts a light inside to shine through the carving. And I've always been fascinated by that. That's something I've wanted to do with wood. I just haven't really figured out the best way to have it come out the way I see it in my head. Like I've played around with it and it never comes out quite where I want it to be.
The learning aspect.
Yeah. So, I mean, but I've seen you're like messing around a bit with wood carving as well, right?
Yes. So I tried power carving. That was like one of the first things I did because I wanted to make a bowl. And I was like, I want to make a bowl. And I said, well, I had an angle grinder and I'm like, same thing. There wasn't a lot of information or tools, all the tools. Now I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. I wish I had that. So all I knew was like grinding disc and flat disc. And I didn't know where to get anything from. I just went to like Harbor Freight.
Yep.
So I bought a Harbor Freight, like this metal disc with like these little bumps on it. It's similar to it's a terrible version of what is out now with like the big, cuts all disc. Yeah. And flat disc starting at, 30 grit. And I just like went to town. I made 4 bowls total and out of oak and honey locust. And I was like, honey locust is so hard. And I was like, this is crazy. And it was so hard and so time consuming. And I love them though. And I was like, these are great. So I made 2 honey locust bowls. I love those. And then I did the oak bowl. Somebody gave me a log that from a tree that fell down during a storm. And I was like, oh, cool. I'm going to carve this. And I'm out there just like flinging wood chips from the bark everywhere. I didn't even know about like debarking first and like all these things. And I mean, I didn't have a shop. So I didn't have a garage. I had my shop in the backyard on the patio. So, I mean, I'm just like destroying our whole entire yard. It was so crazy, but so fun. And then I said, for the oak ones, I was like, I want to sand these. I want to coat them in resin. And I actually like found a resin, like a quick dry resin and coated it. Kind of started off like that. But then I just took a break for like a really long time because I was like, that is, it's kind of brutal. And started tinkering with like other stuff where that's kind of when I got into like wall decor, same really interesting wood where you don't have to do much to it, but add, cut, make it into a wall art. Started doing that. And that was fun. So now there's all these cool tools out. I'm like, I'm getting those and I'm going to do some more power carving again. Because I just love you can make anything. Literally, I feel like you can make anything power carving. And so now I feel like another rabbit hole to go down. I'm like, oh, I got, ball spheres and I'm sitting there like just doing all these different things and it chews through the wood like way faster, obviously, than a 30 grit flapper disc. So like I'm impressed
that you tried that. I mean, yeah, I'm with you. Like the only thing that was out there when I started power carving that was like out there on like YouTube and information wise was some of the big YouTube makers had been given the Arbortech stuff. And so they were, doing those. So I just went out and like bought all that. I don't use the Arbortech stuff at all anymore. I've, moved on as I've learned different things. But yeah, I remember and it still is I would say the thing that evolves the most for me in power carving is how to sand. So we've gotten the carving down pretty good, so it's not as stressful on my body anymore to get down to the rough shape. But sanding all of those rough shapes is a continuous progression of figuring out, okay, I try this and it doesn't work. So like I started with like the flat discs on the grinder too, and learned pretty quickly that, I mean, it gets rid of the rough stuff, but it's pretty hard to like get those intricate curves done well. Um, and hand sanding is just a big no thank you. I just don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I saw you posted you like you did some power carving on redwood, and you're like, no, thank you. And I'm like, yeah, redwood.
That was the worst. I had this piece and I was like, well, it was not going to use it for anything else.
Right.
I did finally get the saber tooth grinder disc.
Yep.
And I'm like, yeah, let's do this. And I've tried that on walnut before, and I'm like, oh, that was great. That wasn't bad. So I was like, I'm gonna just turn this into a tray, and I'm going, and it's just like this fuzzy, splintery mess. I mean, it's just like it's chipping. I was like, this was a terrible idea, but I started it, right? So I was like, gonna finish it. And then you get to the end, and now it's fuzzy and I'm not sanding this, right? So I hit it really quick with like where I could with like an orbital sander. And then that's when I was like, I just took a blowtorch to it.
Yep.
Like, burn it. It's going to be a black redwood bowl. And then added some color to it real quick. And I'm like, oh, it's a cool Halloween candy dish now. So
yeah. I made the very first like professional thing I made, which was I made it in a woodworking class classes that I took when I was in Southern California. And so the first project is always like a clock. They give you some like designs. You have to pick one of the designs, and then like you can alter it some, but you're making a clock. And because I was in Southern California, I had like bought off of Craigslist some like old growth redwood that somebody had from like a family property or whatever, because you're not supposed to harvest old wood, old growth redwood. So like I had bought a bunch of it and I loved it, but it was like then that I learned, like, if you just look at redwood wrong, it dents. Like that stuff is so soft.
It's so soft.
So soft. And so I made this whole clock out of it. I mean, it's gorgeous. We still have it. I love the clock to death. But I remember like at the end of the class, they had like an open house for people to come through, like see everybody's like finished projects. People were taking pictures, and I had my clock laying down because it's a pretty big wall clock. So it was like laying down on the table so people could look at it. And this woman's like taking pictures of it and drops her camera on the clock. And there's this huge dent. And I was just like, I mean, I almost cried. Like it was total accident, and she was so apologetic, but I was just like, I have no idea how many times I've had to take like hot water and an iron to this redwood because like of how many dents it gets. It's just so I've never tried to carve it, but I totally 100% believe that it's like got that whole fuzzy, like you'd probably have to do it all with like fine discs so that it wouldn't be too aggressive on it.
I started aggressive to get like the initial shape. Right. And then I wanted to, in order to do anything else other than like the chunky stuff, I had to go down to the finest stuff, slow down. I used the little Dremel pen version, slow it completely down. And then like, and I'm like, oh, that kind of defeats I mean, you have to do that for hardwood sometimes, but not as much as that. I was like, this is crazy.
Yep.
I'll stick to the hardwoods.
Yeah. I've only ever had one kind that was like fuzzy, and it was from a neighbor's tree, and it's that like fell in our yard, so we cut it up. And it's like Eastern redbud, I think is the type of tree. And it's really pretty wood. I think partially I was probably carving it before it was fully dry too, but it was that really fuzzy. It was so weird. It was just like the weirdest thing I have ever carved. And then I had to do like a ton of sanding to just get it down to like where it was like a polished feel.
Right. Yes.
Hey makers, today's episode is sponsored in part by toolmomstore.com. At toolmomstore.com, you can find any and all tool-based merchandise for all genders, all sizes. They've got mugs, they've got shirts, all kinds of cool stuff. I have one of the shirts myself that has the hashtag woodworker on it. And I also have a couple of the mugs that define what and who is a tool chick. So super excited with the merchandise that I have. I know that you will be satisfied as well. And also great discount for those of you who listen to the podcast. At checkout, if you enter the code MAKERMOM, you will get a 20% discount off any of the merchandise that you buy. So that's just toolmomstore.com. All right, let's head back into the action.
Not fun.
Oh,
I had to find some other use for softwoods.
yes. Yeah. So what things are you looking to start like experimenting with, in the near future?
I want to get a little bit more into furniture. So I feel like comfortable with building a tabletop or a simple, like something super simple. But as soon as I think about making like the legs for said tabletop, I'm like, yeah, I don't know. So, and I mean, I don't want to do like a straight up and down leg.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So I'm sitting here and thinking, well, how do I cut angles and make it so different? Again, this is like we were talking, the artistic part in you, where you're like, no, it's just a square table, that's too boring. So I want to kind of start experimenting with, I would say, I guess, cutting angles and learning stress points and things like that of, if I put it together like this, is it going to hold? Like, where are all the, I guess maybe like the math behind cutting angles and joinery is something that is so fascinating. I look at like good joinery, real joinery, and I'm like, God, I want to try that. But then I'm like, I look at it and I'm like, do I really want to hand cut dovetails? But it just, again, it's like, it's in my head. I think about it and I'm like, one day I need to try that. I just have to try it to see if it's something that I like doing or like completely hate.
Right. Yeah.
So I would say furniture.
Yeah, I would say like once you start looking, like if you want to do like tapered legs and stuff, Tamar of 3x3 something.
Yes. I have
her
seen her
jigs. Like
yes.
if you,
Yes.
I mean, just watch all of her YouTube videos on her, like how to make the taper jigs for the table saw.
Yes.
Yeah, those would be good. And then, you can always get a dovetail jig for your router too, so that you don't have to do
right. Yes.
cut to start with anyways.
I would say router comfort is something that I have been working on too. Man, there's something about just
I'm with you.
Yeah, I'm more comfortable. Table saw all day, every day. Router, I'm like, okay, exactly, like what am I going to do? Which way is the wood going to fly? If it flies, like how to hold it, all these things. So yeah, that's I
am right there with you. That is the one tool that continues to intimidate me. I will say it's helped getting like the smaller palm router. Like that's allowed me to start doing more, because I feel like I'm more in control of that versus my 3/4, horse router. And it, at least in my case, it probably does not help that I personally know somebody who lost a couple fingertips from a router. So it's like, I know how dangerous that they really can be. To me more so than a table saw. I'm much more intimidated by a router than a table saw. But yeah, I'm with you. We can work on our router confidence together.
I did the same thing. I got a palm router And I'm like, okay, this is cool. Like I have it, I can control it, you know. I also do have a bigger router and don't really bust it out that much.
Yep, yep.
You can do a lot, most of the stuff with a palm router, but
Mhm,
yeah, the other one, I'm like, I mean, I
mhm.
use it, but yeah, it's sketchy sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, exactly,
I
exactly.
just, it's less predictable than the table
Mhm.
saw. I think with the table saw, I feel like it's way more predictable. And once you know about, you know, kickback and how to prevent that, I feel like, and obviously keeping your fingers away from the blade, but like once you're there, you're like, okay, I know what can go wrong.
Yep,
The confidence is there. And the router, I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure.
yep,
So
exactly.
like I tighten the bits to death because I'm thinking like
Yep,
it's gonna fly out. And then I'm like, I can't even get it off because I'm like cranking down on it,
yep,
just trying to make sure like everything is so tight.
yep. Yeah, I remember I only used like, even when I was in like, classes for woodworking, I used the router as little as possible and pretty much only when it was required, like that it was like a required element of the build.
Yeah.
Um, and we even had like they had a large shaper table, which those bits are like huge. I mean, they're
Yeah.
huge.
Oof.
They're for like moldings and stuff like that. And so it was like required that we each like we went through the training on it and we each had to run like one board through there. And that's all I ever did on it. And I
Yeah.
was terrified the entire time. I was like, I'm gonna lose my hand. Like, I just something spinning that fast is scary to me.
Yeah. So you say you're talking about classes. I do want to do that. I want to take a woodworking class like so bad, like an actual professional class. And I think one of the things that is drawing me to that is like the shops are amazing. And I'm like, oh, I would just
Yes.
love to
Yep.
be able to use this, use that, get to know this. I was looking into it out here. It's a bit far. It's a little over an hour drive. It's in Cerritos. I was curious where you took your classes
Yeah,
at.
mine were in, and honestly, I think they ended up closing the program down, which sucks because they spent all this money and did new shop space and everything. But mine was at Palomar Community College in San Marcos, is where I took.
Okay.
They had
Palomar.
a furniture design and making program and a cabinet making
Mm,
program. Like they had a few different majors you could take.
nice.
Um, but I think the last I had heard is that program closed down because the people who were like it was a community college, which means they expect people to like go through the 2-year program and graduate with a degree. And most of the people who were taking the classes were like old retired guys who just
Mm,
wanted to like mess around in a
like a
shop
wood
that was
shop.
well
Yeah.
equipped.
Right.
Uh, but I will say, and again, this would be in San Diego, but I know that sometimes you can find decent classes through maker spaces. So if you have maker spaces that are even remotely close, again, I
Mm,
know there's like a really nice big one in San Diego,
mm,
where they have people who go through and teach like
right.
all kinds of different woodworking classes. And then there again, they usually have a much better equipped shop space
Right.
with
Right.
like higher end tools and even some more like industrial type
Yeah, that's
tooling.
so cool. Yeah, I'm definitely looking into it. I think it would help like I feel like yes, could I figure these things out on my own, like that I want to kind of venture off into to do some furniture, but I think a class, I'm like, but a class would be great to really, really learn it and have that confidence. Cause I'm like, if I build a chair, I'm gonna be freaking out. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if you should sit on that. Even though I'll research
Yep.
how to do it
Yep.
first. It's still like the confidence of a actual class.
Yep.
I think
I
would be
think, I mean,
great.
yeah, exactly to that point. It was the confidence factor.
Mhm.
Like, I didn't get to finish the program. I actually had every intent to graduate from the program, but we ended up having to move back to Iowa. And so I didn't get to finish it. And there's not anything similar here where I live. Um, but it was just enough, like, just having like 3 semesters worth of classes was enough to like give me confidence to be like, well, even if I know a technique close enough to what I want to do, like I can understand more of what I go out and research because like I have some background. And so it's just a little bit more confidence in that, So I definitely am all about like classes give confidence, even if you never use that specific skill again after you leave that class, like just the fact of like using new equipment and like being able to be like, oh, I can do this stuff.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's something in the future. I'll make the drive eventually.
There you go.
Maybe when my son starts school or something and I can have some playing hours during the day.
Yeah.
It's been interesting with woodworking, with them around too, because they one of my like favorite things, and I just love it, is like when my daughter's like, my mommy's a woodworker. And I'm like, oh my God, I love that. Like she's like, are you working today, mommy? I'm like, yes, I'm gonna go in the shop and work. And she just like, she kind of sees the correlation.
One second, Karla, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, I'll be there in a minute. All right. Sorry.
Yeah, she gets to see the kind of like the correlation of like, a job and like woodworking. And I'm like, yeah, so it's super cool. But my son, he's a lot younger, so now he just wants to like pick up the hammer and like go to town. I'm like, no, don't touch that.
Yep, I totally understand. My daughter's the same way. She's 5.5 and she likes to tell everybody that her mommy is a woodworker, so I love that too.
Super cool.
Well, Karla, we are actually at the end of our time together, so I want to give you a chance though to let people know how they can find you and follow along with you.
So I would say I'm mostly on Instagram and Facebook, but my Facebook account was hacked on Friday.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I haven't got it back yet. But Black Poppy Woodworks on Instagram and hopefully soon again Facebook. And that's pretty much where I put like everything. Okay. I did open up a TikTok account, but I haven't quite figured that out yet. I'm really still figuring out Instagram too, but if you want to see any work or just chat or whatever, I'm on there. So
excellent. And I'll include the links for that in the show notes so people can find you easily.
Thank you.
And thanks for chatting today.
Thank you. It was fun.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, everyone. Again, that was Karla of Black Poppy Woodworks, and I'll include the link on how you can follow along with her in the show notes for today's episode. Just look for that in the description on your podcast app, or if you're watching this on YouTube, check the description down below for that link. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure that you hit that subscribe button, like and comment, do a review. All of that helps the podcast get discovered by more people. And speaking of which, please make sure that you share about the podcast with your friends. Just a couple of friends will help us grow. I have a goal of hitting 10,000 downloads in 1 month by the end of the year, and we're starting on September now. So please help me reach that goal. Right now, averaging about 2,500 downloads. So trying to multiply that by 4 by the end of December. All right, when I am not making podcast episodes, you can find me designing and making furniture and other home decor at freemanfurnishings.com and at Freeman Furnishings across all of the social media platforms. I'm active though on pretty much a daily basis over on Instagram, so at Freeman Furnishings over there, stop by and say hi. And while you're there over on Instagram, make sure you're following along with the podcast too. That's at Crafting Revolution. All right, it is Friday. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. I hope you have a great holiday weekend. And as always, let's go craft a revolution.
She, her, them, they got something they want to say. Solution for the toxic masculinities. Pollution